Greetings, my name is Johnny Kickwriter, and I'm giving a presentation on Confederate money. Being a member of the George E. Dixon Camp 1962, I've given this presentation several times over the years. I began collecting Confederate currency probably about 15 years ago using the Criswell style technique and an inventory system, and he's cataloged 72 different types, and I'm trying to assemble the entire collection of 72. A little background first on Confederate currency. I'm not going to read these slides. You can read those. But notes were started to be issued in the early part of 1861. An interesting thing about these notes, they were all hand signed and numbered by a staff of primarily of women. And most of the notes had uneven corners because they were cut with rough scissors. And 11 different companies were used to create these notes, and hence that's why there's so many different varieties. Two processes were used in the creation of these notes. One is the intaglio. That's what most people are familiar with, the painstaking engraving of a plate, and the ink is transferred to paper from the plate. And secondly, lithography, which is a chemical process, probably not too far away from the Xerox machines, but certainly a lot more cruder. However, the Treasury Secretary, he was unhappy with the slow issue of the currency using the intaglio, so he pressed forward for lithography. You can see the difference in the quality of the notes, intaglio on the left and lithography on the right. 6 notes, one's Montgomery notes, which are considered some of the most beautiful in the world, were used the intaglio process with the first issue, and you can see the difference on the Richmond notes and the little faded and not near as ornate. About $1.7 billion in currency was issued under various acts of the Congressional Congress, but it was never considered legal tender. And Southerners and military personnel were asked to accept it as such. Bills had, like I said, 72 different types. The slide shows 72 of them actually were bogus. Confederate soldiers actually saw a few notes, and the $2 and the lower denomination notes were used to pay soldiers. And states were issuing notes as well, in 5, 10, and 25 cents, and etc. Only a few soldiers actually received $5 notes. Officers might see some of the higher denominations, but no one wanted the higher denominations notes because it was hard to make change. Something called fractional currency was issued, a little fractional note, less than $1, and issued by the states primarily, but the Confederacy issued theirs. And interesting, right at the end of the war, when the Confederate currency was next to worthless, they issued more 50-cent notes, which no one seems to know why. Notes had various designs we call vignettes on currency. The South was very limited in skilled engravers and printers, and so they had to borrow a lot of these images from other notes. Some of the designs were abstract depictions of mythological gods and goddesses, and like I said earlier, many designs were taken from bank and state notes. There's some other designs on currency: navigation, sailor and soldiers, and sailors. Capitol buildings on the CSA currency. In South Carolina is the Capitol, Tennessee's Capitol building, and Virginia. A lot of portraits on CSA notes. Senators from Louisiana, Judah Benjamin, John C. Calhoun from my home state was on a note. Clement Clay, senator from Alabama, and of course Jefferson Davis on the right. He was pictured on some notes. Other portraits: R.M.T. Hunter. He was a Secretary of State for a while, and then Andrew Jackson from the Battle of New Orleans. Stonewall Jackson had a note issued in his honor. It was a $500 note. I actually own one of those notes. It was issued primarily just to honor him. And Christopher Miniger was a CSA treasurer for a while. He was a hard money man, but had to be forced to adopt paper. Lucy Pickens, wife of the governor of South Carolina, which my home is only a stone's throw from Pickens County, named after him. A lot of people falsely identified Lucy Pickens as Mrs. Jefferson Davis. She was probably picked to be the allegory of women of the CSA. And George Rudolph, a grandson of Thomas Jefferson, and he was the Secretary of War in '62. Other portraits: Alexander Stephens, congressman from Georgia. He opposed many of the CSA policies, and he was governor of Georgia shortly after the war. And George Washington, he was pictured on the note. Uh, he was considered, the father of our country, and Southerners seized upon his many virtues. This was an interesting one. Apparently, in the haste to make notes, uh, they grabbed the mayor's picture from Savannah and put on a note. He actually was mayor in 1854, and he was a lawyer and a banker, but he opposed secession. And the people who assembled a note and put it together and printed them up didn't know that. So it was kind of an irony that an anti-secessionist was on one of the notes. A lot of discussion about slaves on Confederate notes, and there were several. Only six slave vignettes were featured on 7 notes, and all taken from state notes. States had a lot more slave images on their notes. And here's the remainder. This is a note I mentioned earlier from Stonewall Jackson, a military hero, and it's the only note that with the Confederate battle flag listed there. Here's some miscellaneous notes. You can take a look at those. $100 note, $20 note, $50 note, 20. Notice I got the word type lifted after the note. Those are from the Crimswell's book and his way he cataloged them. Here's some other notes. Different colors, different styles. Uh, the highest quality red paper, red fiber note paper. Use this, and this is a very colorful note. Interesting, this note here, it's called the Indian Princess note. It's pretty famous, and the counterfeit is far more rarer and genuine, and the genuine notes, meaning the counterfeit is worth more. And some other notes. You have the South striking down the Union here, and horses pulling artillery. This note here uh, nearly got Secretary Memminger fired. Uh, it caused the Secretary of War, Randolph, had to resign, and it was too late to substitute the portrait. They didn't like Lucy Pickens up there. This one here on the bottom right is called a Lincoln note because they found a $5 Confederate note in Lincoln's wallet when he was assassinated, probably carrying it around as a souvenir. Matter of fact, I just mentioned that when Lincoln was shot at Ford's Theater, he was carrying a brown leather wallet. Here's a picture of it and a $5 note. And that note remained with the family for more than 70 years. And this note is now at the National Archives, Washington, D.C. Some of the notes had backs, a lot of them did not, and not very ornate in their design and somewhat faded. Nickname Blue Black, that was used during the war as a nickname for Confederate notes. Confederate notes were more like bonds than they were real money. And what you would do is you would take your note to the bank, and the banks would cancel it. You can see the holes there, various ways of canceling. There's a star cross there, and these little clips at the bottom. And that show that your note has been redeemed, and they would pay you back face value on the note plus interest, because they were interest-bearing notes. As I said, many were interest-bearing notes. And you notice right at the top of this one note, 6 months after the ratification of a treaty of peace between the Confederate States of America, Confederate States and the United States, the Confederate States of America will pay to the bearer on demand $50. Here's a note, fundable 8% stock or bonds. Interest-bearing notes again. and it's stamped on the back, showing it's been redeemed. And we talked about state notes, and I've got a few here. 10 of the 13 states issued paper money during the war, and some of them are quite nice. I own a few state notes, and a bunch of other notes. All kinds of notes were issued during that time. Private banks, counties, railroads, merchants also issued notes. Just about anybody could issue notes back then. Counterfeiting became a big deal during the war because the North figured that if they could devalue the Confederate currency, that would have an adverse impact on their economy. And it became a huge, huge problem. Best known counterfeiter was a guy by the name of Samuel Upton, a Philadelphia businessman. He was responsible for over 2/3 of the counterfeits, and he produced notes and postage stamps in '62 and sold them as novelties. That's when it started. And Upham's earliest notes had his name and address at the bottom of the notes. The people started cutting off the name and address on the bottom of the notes and passing them on as genuine currency to buy cotton and such. And later he began to printing them without his name on them. Upton counterfeits. Towards the end of the war, he was offering $20,000 in Confederate notes for only $5, and he claimed to printed over 1.5 million notes. And a lot of his counterfeit notes are now very collectible. A lot of them are worth more than a genuine. Currency eroded something awful toward the end of the war. For example, by the end of the war, a cake of soap could sell as much as $50, and a suit of clothes for close to $3,000. And Southerners begin to lose confidence in the currency. And when you lose confidence in your money, boy, you're in serious trouble. And then everybody went back to bartering, and then you had the black market and the northern greenbacks, what they call them, began to circulate in the underground. And Meminger was blamed for the demise of the currencies, although, like I say, a lot of people were outside the CSA trying to destabilize it. And the growing instability of the money was attributed to several factors, lack of gold and silver reserves, not much industry in the South, and the war went bad, and a perfect recipe for a disaster for an economy. Notice this chart here on inflation, that how much money the Confederate notes it would take to buy an ounce of gold. That shows you the impact right toward the end of the war. It became virtually worthless. There are some fantasy notes. They call them fantasy notes or bogus notes. No record that the CSA produced these, although somebody did, but they're very highly desirable. I do not own any of these notes. You get the female riding deer, very, very popular in demand. And then you've got what's called facsimile or fake notes. These are notes that were produced after the war as collectibles and novelties. You can see the difference in the color. Go from the right, which is genuine, and to the left, which is genuine, and right, which is the fake. And some of you may remember this, the Cheerios cereal collection. I actually remember this back in the late 50s, early 60s when the cereal company began to put notes on the side of their boxes and challenge people to collect them. Good luck with doing that today. And then you've got fake notes or facsimile notes. These are ones that's just produced, and you find these in gift stops in stores and such. The coinage was a issue regarding the production of money in the South. The Confederacy actually took possession of some federal mints, one in New Orleans, another one in Dahlonega, Georgia, and then Charlotte, North Carolina. But none of those facilities had significant bullion, and no coins were minted. Jefferson Davis did authorize the production of a Confederate half dollar. The CSA half dollar. Now, this was a ordinary U.S. dollar that was minted by the U.S. government, and it has the Liberty sitting on the obverse, 7 stars. And so what they did was they took and added the words Confederate States of America, half dollar, and 4 were made as a prototype. Now here's the 1861 New Orleans half dollar. It was minted under 3 different governments, federal, state, and CSA. And in January of '61, Louisiana seceded from the Union, and mint personnel were forced to produce another 1.2 million half dollars. And then Louisiana gave the mint to the CSA in February, and it produced another $962,000. Combined total over 2.5 million of these were produced, and they're indistinguishable from one another. Now, the point being made here is some were made under the federal government, some were made under the state government, and some were made under the CSA government. Now, some of these CSA minted coins were identified in the SS Republic wreck. That was a ship that went down that was carrying dollars, half dollars that had been minted by the New Orleans Mint under the auspices of the CSA. And those are quite desirable to have. There was a 1 cent coin. This gentleman Lovett was hired to make a 1 cent piece. He made it out of nickel, and he stopped working, and 12 are currently known to exist, and I don't know where they are. CSA restrikes. Caution, caution. Somebody trying to sell you some Confederate coinage. A coin restrike. It's important to understand the language here. It's a coin that has been made with the original dies. Otherwise, the coin is a copy or reproduction. And there were literally thousands of coins being sold today using the word restrike. They are not. Copies have no collector value. Restrikes do. And you can see the numbers that I have here. The 1 cent, 12 original, 67 restrikes, and then later restrikes. And then you had the 50 cents, 4 original, early restrikes, and none of the other originals were produced nor restrikes. So if you come across somebody trying to sell you a coin, make sure it's been authenticated. Here's 1 cent restrikes. You had 12, like I say earlier, minted. Notice the value of the coin if you can get it in MS Mint State 65. 7 gold restrikes, silver restrikes, copper restrikes. In 57, again, restrikes. And then to close this out, there was a poem written by a Major Jonas of Mississippi that he wrote on the back of a note that was it circulated around, representing nothing on God's earth now and naught in the waters below it, as a pledge of a nation that's dead and gone. Keep it, dear friend, and show it. Show it to those who will lend an ear to the tale that was this paper can tell, of liberty born, of patriot's dream, of a storm-cradled nation that fell. Too poor to possess the precious ores, and too many of a stranger to borrow, we issued today our promise to pay, hoping to redeem on the morrow. But days flew by, weeks became years, our coffers were empty still, coin was so scarce, our treasury quaked, if a dollar would drop in the till. We knew it had scarcely the value of gold, yet as gold the soldiers received it. It looked into our eyes with a promise to pay, and each patriot believed it. But the faith that was in us was strong indeed, and our poverty well we discerned, and then little checks represented the pay that our suffering veterans earned. But our boys thought little of prize or pay, or of bills that were overdue. We knew if it bought us our daily bread, or bread today, 'twas the best our poor country could do. Keep it. It tells our history over from the birth of the dream to its last, modest and born of the angel of hope. Like our hope of success, it passed. Thank you for watching.